Good morning, councillors. Good morning to executive team members and those joining us in the gallery in person today, as well as those joining us in the digital gallery today. It's my privilege to declare the ordinary meeting of Tuesday, 5th of September 2023 open, and in doing so to pause and pay respects to the traditional owners of the lands on which the Scenic Regional Council is formed and on which we meet today. Pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging, and again congratulate them on their continued nurture of their culture. Councillors, I note we have a full attendance of councillors for today's meeting. Therefore I have no apologies, and I move to item 4 on the agenda, and we are joined today by Pastor Josh Cox via telephone. And Josh, thank you for making your time to join us. We always appreciate your support, and we're in your hands.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, and to the councillors and staff. Thanks for the opportunity again. Sorry I can't be there with you in person, but I'm heading off to just about to walk into a meeting. I think I was like all of us who woke up yesterday morning, perhaps with a big rumble and some beautiful rain on the roofs of our homes. Hopefully, we all got a little bit of rain. I know some areas got some good amount of rain. But certainly as I was lying in bed giving thanks to God for the rain, thinking my tanks are getting some water in finally, and my grass might actually look a bit greener. I also had a thought for the farmers. I know at least 3 of them who had a significant amount of hay on the ground, and they had cut under good advice from the bomb that there was no rain around, so I don't think they were quite as thankful. But it did remind me of a verse in 1 Thessalonians 5, and just going to read that. Rejoice always, Paul says, pray without ceasing, in everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. So I want to do that. I want to give thanks for all things, for the rain that did come, for those who felt that it was good, and others who are a little bit dismayed by that, and also pray for the meeting. So let me pray. Gracious God, Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for the fact that we can rejoice, and as Paul writes to the Thessalonians, that we should give thanks in all circumstances, in everything, for this is the will of God. We pray for this meeting. We ask you, Lord, that you would undertake for the discussion and the decisions, give wisdom and understanding to matters that pertain to this area. Lord, we ask for and give thanks for the rain that fell, and Lord, we know that it was nourishing to our land and filling of our tanks. And we also do think of those who were inconvenienced by a significant rain, and we do pray, Lord, that you with all help us to give thanks in all things. And so we pray for this meeting, we commit it to you, and we ask for these things in your name. Amen.
Thank you, Josh. It is always a pleasure to have you share with us. Thank you also for your leadership role in community. As ever, we appreciate that support and the important nurturing role that you play for our communities. Understand you do have a meeting to get to, so we will bid you good day and look forward to further conversation with you in the future. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for that. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, councillors. Bye-bye. Councillors,
we move to item 5 of the agenda. I have no notified public questions for today's meeting. Move to item 6, which is the declarations of various conflicts of interest. Not advised of any for today's meeting. So also move to item 7. There are no announcements or mirror minutes for today's meeting. There are also no deputations or petitions that have been advised of at item 8. So we now move to item 9 of today's agenda, which is the confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting. Councillors, we've all had access to those minutes, and I therefore move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 22nd of August 2023 be adopted. I seek a seconder. Councillor Hay, thank you. Any questions to the minutes, councillors? If not, Any discussion? If not, I don't feel the need to speak to it. Anyone wishing to speak additionally? If not, we put it to the vote. Those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We therefore now move to business arising from those minutes. CEO, I will note there was just one query that was carried forward about the alignment of numbers around borrowings. Is the GM able to speak to that difference between the number in the budget report for the year, which was, I think, 39, and the number that shows there now with the consolidation?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was hoping to give that at the next meeting, but effectively it's a end of year processing wise where we don't necessarily show the breakup between current and non-current until the June next year, effectively. But I will provide that in a more detailed in the August report.
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure we didn't lose sight of that. Thank you. Councillors, therefore we move to the business of today's meeting and we move to item 11.1, and that's on page 4 of the agenda for those following along. And Councillor Enright, I turn to you to introduce this item.
Thank you, Mayor. As the Portfolio Councillor for Community Arts and Culture, I would like to introduce the report 2022 to 2023 Scenic Rim Community Grants Program in-kind contribution annual update. I take the report as read, councillors, and I now move that 1, council note that the 2022-2023 Scenic Rim Community Grants Program in-kind contributions are provided to a broad range of not-for-profit community groups and organisations representing a total of $43,895.87 as detailed in the report. 2, council note that additional in-kind support was also provided to community groups and organisations in the form of photocopying, tent and marquee hire and banner signage. And 3, council acknowledge that the 2022-2023 Scenic Rim Community Grants Program in-kind contributions is essential in supporting not-for-profit community groups and organisations to develop and deliver programs that benefit the Scenic Rim community.
Thank you. Councillor, I seek a seconder. Councillor McConnell, thank you. Questions to the report? Councillor McConnell.
Thank you, Chair. To the council, if I could, I note in the motion the broad range for not-for-profit community groups and organisations. I notice within the list of organisations is a couple of state government identities. Would you be able to elaborate how they're included within the not-for-profit organisations?
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor McConnell. I believe those entities are ones who provide a service to our community through perhaps a school formal activity, and the support is given through reduced hall hire and those sort of costs, but not a monetary support.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions to the report? Any further discussion? If not, Councillor, you wish to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I would. I'm very pleased to speak to this motion. The support that Council provides to the hundreds of not-for-profit community groups and organisations is by both monetary and non-monetary assistance. Both play an important role in keeping development and to deliver programs that benefit all members of the Scenic Rim. These non-monetary or in-kind contributions save our community groups precious funds, assisting them to deliver these wide range of projects and programs that benefits our communities and contributes to the social well-being of our local Scenic residents. I'd like to take this opportunity to again recognise and thank our hundreds of volunteer community groups for their amazing contribution to improving the well-being of our communities.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone seeking leave to speak additionally? Councillor Hay?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to recognise that the maximum annual in-kind allocation has been increased from $1,000 per financial year to $1,500 per financial year commencing in the current financial year, and I think that will be a benefit to a lot of the not-for-profits. The extra $500 in-kind support is $500 they don't have to find from fundraising, so I think that's a good step in the right direction.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else seeking leave to speak additionally? If not, councillors, we put the you wish to close, Councillor Noakes? We put the motion. Those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We move forward to page 10 of today's agenda for those following along, and we move to item 11.2, and I turn to Councillor Hay to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. As the Portfolio Councillor for Parks, Gardens and Open Spaces, I would like to introduce the report, item 11.2, reserve naming, unnamed reserve at Boyland Road, Boyland. I'd just like to provide a short amount of background before I read the recommendation. An application has been received seeking to name a currently unnamed reserve adjacent to Cavill Bridge, Boyland Road, Boyland. Subsequent to advertising, no objections or submissions of alternative names have been received. The only party with an interest in the naming is the Bidadabar Creek Heritage Group. The approval of the name Bidadabar Creek Heritage Reserve will satisfy the Bidadabar Creek Heritage Group's 20-year campaign to name this reserve, and there is no valid reason to not approve the name. So I'd like to move the recommendation that Council name the unnamed reserve situated adjacent to Cavill Bridge on Boyland Road at Boyland, Bidadabar Creek Heritage Reserve, and I take the report as read. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Seeker. Seconder, Councillor McConnell. Any questions to the report, councillors? Any discussion to the report? You wish to speak to your motion, councillor?
No, thank you, Chair. I think the report is self-explanatory.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak additionally? Councillor West.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say how there are still a number of long-term residents up in this valley who were very much part of this process in the very beginning, and back in 2020 were very much involved in the writing of the book, The History of the Bidadabar Valley. So they will be very happy to see this outcome. So thank you to all involved. It's been quite a long process, but we're eventually there.
Thank you, councillor. Anyone else seeking leave to speak additionally? Wish to close it all, councillor? No. Thank you. We put the motion. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We move to page 15 of today's agenda, item 11.3, and we turn to you, Councillor West, to introduce us.
Thank you, Mayor. As the portfolio holder for roads, bridges and paths, I'd like to introduce item 11.3, which is Road Network Extension, Pamplings Road, Peak Crossing. I take the report as being read, and I'd like to move the motion, which is in two parts. Number one, that Council advise the applicant that it is prepared to accept an extension of Pamplings Road, Peak Crossing, by 300 metres to allow permanent access to the property described as Lot 171 CH3188, provided A, all costs of the road construction are to be borne by the applicant, B, the road reserve must be surveyed by a registered surveyor to ensure the road will be constructed within the road reserve, C, the road must be designed by a registered professional engineer of Queensland, RPEQ, in accordance with Council's Planning Scheme Policy 1, Infrastructure Design. D, constructing or interfering with a road or its operation application must be submitted to Council. E, following the completion of the road, the RPEQ will provide as constructed plans and certify that the works were constructed in accordance with the approved plans or approved variation to the approved plans. Item F, the defect liability period for the road will be a minimum of 12 months. And the second part of the motion is Council note on completion of the extension of the 300 metres of Pamplings Road, Peak Crossing, that this additional section of Class 5D Rural Access Road will be added to Council's Road Asset Register.
Thank you, Councillor. I seek a seconder. Councillor McGuinness, thank you. Questions to the report, councillors? Any discussion to the report? If not, you wish to speak further to the motion, councillor?
I do, thank you, Mayor. Currently, this property has no constructed road access, but there is gazetted reserve, but it is unformed at this stage. Council is able to accept such extensions of a road or a section following compliance of the evaluation process. I'd just like to add that the required construction road will be a Class 5D rural access road, which is unsealed and 5.5 metre gravel to be appropriately designed depth. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Anyone wishing to speak against? Seeking leave to speak additionally? If not, we put the motion. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. That brings to a close the items of on the main agenda. However, we do have a late agenda item. And councillors, before I introduce item 11.4, in the preparation of the final report, there are two attachments that should have been included with the report. So I would like to table those. I note that councillors have received copies as we arrived today, as well as having it electronically. And I move that the following documents, appointed reviewer statement and proposed high-level local government infrastructure plan amendment project schedule and timeline, be received and tabled for consideration with this report, item 11.4, and included in the minutes of this ordinary meeting. Councillors, in moving that, I also note that there will be some minor amendments to correct a couple of date descriptions in the appointed reviewer statement to align with the actual events that were described fully in the report. I seek a seconder. Councillor McConnell, thank you. Any questions to those matters? If not, sorry, Councillor McConnell.
Sorry, these matters?
So, these.
Yet.
No. I table these to be considered with the full agenda item. I won't speak any further. I think it's been sufficient explanation. Anyone wishing to speak against? Speak additionally? Put the motion. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously then. Thank you, councillors. Sorry, councillor, I thought you waved your hand up. No?
I'd just like to request that in future we be provided with the attachments in a timely manner. It's very difficult to read these when they're received virtually after business hours the night before the meeting, given the amount of reading that we're expected to do for this meeting and the councillor and executive workshop which follows. It's just difficult to manage your workload when the attachments are sent around late. Thank you.
I think, councillor, yes, it is normal that they're included with the reports through the process, and that was an administrative miscommunication that didn't occur for a couple of reasons, but it's certainly not the normal practice. I think councillors would attest to that. So thank you. We now move to item. So did you vote or not? Sorry. Well, sorry. Those in favour? Thank you. That is Carried. Unanimous. So we move to the fullness of item 11.4. Councillors, this matter has to do with the review process for the local government infrastructure plan. Whilst I note that all councillors have had access to the report and belatedly now the reference materials for the contents of this report, the local government infrastructure plan is obviously a vital part that is formed in conjunction with our planning scheme and plays a valuable part of preparing for the future of our region and planning for it. And it's fitting and timely that it goes through a review process. There is a prescribed timeframe for that to occur. And therefore, the report before us today provides us with the initial review and then the work plan for bringing that up into a current state. So I move that one, council note the outcomes of the review of the local government infrastructure plan outlined in the now attached reviewer statement, and two, council prepare an amendment to the local government infrastructure plan in accordance with the Planning Act 2016 and the Minister's guidelines and rules. Seek a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Enright. Now open to discussion or questions initially. So, sorry, Councillor Enright.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, a question through the CEO, if I may. My question relates to page 5 of the report. I think it's the fourth paragraph in relation to transport infrastructure network. And the sentence there in that paragraph says, refers to not required to serve new development anticipated in the Scenic Rim region. And I just ask if that could be expanded upon, please.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question, and through you, the Chair. This comment relates mainly to the fact that the current LGIP has identified all trunk infrastructure. Really, the LGIP's aim is to actually identify those items of trunk infrastructure that are required to aid current or future development. So that line actually relates to the fact that there are a number of items that are currently identified within our current local government infrastructure plan, although requiring upgrade for various other reasons, do not necessarily align with the requirements of what the main function of the LGIP, and that is to provide guidance to the investment required to aid current and future development.
Thank you. Further questions? Councillor McConnell, were you?
Just in, thank you, Mr Mayor, through you to the CEO. In relation to the LGIP, how far ahead do we look for the infrastructure? What's the forward planning time that we're looking at?
Through the Chair, and thank you, Councillor, for the question. Generally speaking, we have a 10-year long-term financial forecast. We also have a 10-year capital works program. The LGIP together is based on our most up-to-date, or at that time, most up-to-date information around our growth and the identified urban footprint and the infrastructure required to manage that growth. At this point in time, it's a 10-year program. Certainly doesn't stop us from looking further and beyond that in case growth does accelerate, or alternatively will be further advanced in our planning if it doesn't meet those growth figures.
Thank you. And just a follow on from that, if I can, I noticed that the Department of Transport and Urban Utilities are mentioned in the document, but not some of the other state government entities like Health and Department of Education. So with the current growth anticipated within Beaudesert, do we liaise or consult with the Department of Education, additional schools, active transport to get our new suburbs to and from those schools, either the current schools or any new schools that could be built to service the growth within Beaudesert?
CEO, we might seek that from a different GM.
We are already.
Thank you.
So, thank you, councillor. So there's two aspects to this. Firstly is that we in the planning area have a 20-year forecast through the GMS and the like, our strategic planning. So whilst the LGIP is 10 years, we're also aware of what's going to happen in 20 years, and that influences how we develop the LGIP. In regard to state entities, yes, we do liaise with those, and we have through the process of the GMS, and they've had the opportunity to put their feedback into that. We would continue through the LGIP process to make them aware and have their comments in there. There is a fine line, though, that these are state services. So while we advocate and the like, at the end of the day, it's their call. So, my train of thought. Yeah.
Sorry, can you push your button down? Through Mr. Mayor, the draft submission that's getting put forward for Shaping South East Queensland has specific reference in there, 2 schools, 2 hospitals, and try encouraging that level of planning out of the state government, so it actually works in well with our own planning as well.
The other thing I meant to say is that during the process of preparing the GMS and our forward planning documents, we liaise heavily with DTMR and urban utilities, but also the other state departments such as education, so they're aware of what the anticipated growth in the region is, and they're planning for it in the background in their own departments and the like.
Thank you. Thank you. Further questions, Councillor Enright?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to this, through the CEO. My next question refers to page 7 of the report. The report states that the estimated budget figure for the LGIP technical work will be carried out in the 3 successive financial years. My question is, what components, if any, will be carried out in the current financial year's budget?
Through the Chair, and thank you again for the question. What's currently involved in the current budget, we have some allocated funds to review and update our stormwater flow analysis within key major urban centres within the Scenic Rim. We also have ongoing traffic studies that will inform the data required to get us to a point to have a updated transport strategy in line with our current growth management strategy. And we also have undertaken a sports infrastructure review and are in the process of updating our sport and rec plan, which also will inform future needs of the community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor McConnell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the CEO. In regards to page 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, paragraph 6, the review has also identified that planning for active transport, which is footpaths, in council areas lacking. How does that fit in with our requirements, or with the developers' requirements within new developments within Beaudesert? Given the fact that it's sometimes, or all across the region, because it's sometimes staged out of sequence, as we've found in the recent year. We've had a couple of developments out of sequence. How does the LGIP address the fact for out of sequence developments that don't link that part of the development to the major part of town?
Thank you for the question, and through the Chair. Certainly we will end up with some development that is out of sequence. The idea of having an LGIP is actually understanding where that trunk infrastructure lies. It's then a decision of council if we want to bring forward an item of trunk infrastructure that actually is identified within a future program to aid a link to a development that is in theory is out of sequence. If you're looking at the first development being adjacent to the current urban development, and the urban footprint, another developer develops 2 or 3 lots from that, certainly there is an opportunity to bring forward that program or proposed work. The thing is, it needs to be identified as key infrastructure. I note also that you mentioned within the paragraph there around the planning for active transport. We have an outdated footpath and bikeway strategy that did identify a number of links. There has also been some work being undertaken within the township of Bay Desert funded by the Department of Transport and Main Roads, which we're hoping can be extended to other urban areas around active transport, which also includes your not only your pedestrian use, but also the use of bicycles as well. So that work is yet to be completed, but will certainly inform the LGIP.
Thank you, GM. Councillor West.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to the CEO. Just on page 4, the water and sewerage infrastructure networks, I'm just wondering, given that we do have a close relationship with urban utilities, do we know whether they have commenced their refresh of the NetServe plan yet, please? Thank you.
Thank you. That is an ongoing process with the NetServe plan, and we have been dealing with them closely and will continue to do so. So they rely a lot on our growth management strategy for preparing their NetServe plan and where we see development occurring and when. So essentially they rely on the data that we provide.
Thank you.
Councillor McConnell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you to the CEO again. Back on page 5 and back onto stormwater infrastructure network, paragraph 2. It talks about priority infrastructure areas and that further work may be required to address stormwater infrastructure requirements in these areas. And there is land zoned for urban development immediately outside that warrants trunk infrastructure requirements. Could you elaborate further on what work may be required?
Through the Chair, thank you again for a question. This question relates to identifying where the flow paths are in reality. So I mentioned earlier that when answering a previous question around the level of funding or investment that is required, what projects are actually required, an identification and a full study of our stormwater requirements is certainly a key aspect, which we have some funding within the budget to actually identify what our future stormwater needs may look like within those areas that are earmarked within the urban footprint. So it could be simply identifying a tract of land that should be left free of development to allow for stormwater flows. It could be the sizing of regional detention or retention basins. Until we do that, undertake the study of those areas and run the stormwater models over them, specifically what it will look like, it will be determined after that fact. But it's around preserving those corridors, understanding and recognising the infrastructure that would be not only serving that development but other developments, and when those other developments come online, that they don't impact downstream.
Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, CEO, I have a couple of questions to the Acting GM, Customer and Regional Prosperity, if I may. Could you provide us a brief explanation of the relationship, the importance of an LGIP in relation to the allocation or the requirement for infrastructure charge payments for developments?
Thank you for the question, Mayor. So the LGIP is a requirement for council to have if we want to charge infrastructure charges. So you'll see the cost of preparing an LGIP is quite significant. It does provide a lot of planning for the next 5 to 10 years in what, our infrastructure. But in return, our ability then to charge infrastructure charges generates about $2.5 million per year towards those upgrades. With the growth in the region or any low government area, someone has to pay for that, and normally that would fall back to existing ratepayers to pay for that. So in this circumstance, by preparing the LGIP, understanding where our growth is going to occur and how much it's going to cost, we can forward plan Infrastructure charges assist in that trunk development and paying for it, but they certainly don't pay for it all. But it certainly takes a lot of the burden off of the ratepayers.
Thank you for that explanation, Acting GM. Any further questions, Councillor McConnell?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you to the CO again. What is the estimated time of completion for the review?
Thank you for the question. I believe the second A3 attachment has a projected timeline associated with it. I haven't got it open at this point in time, but bear with me. Oh, yes, I do. At this point in time, it looks to it's planned to be May 2025. So it is a long process, but given the level of data that's required to identify and update involvement with the transport strategy, within that program or schedule, there are some key milestones that need to be met to meet that timeline as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further, Councillor Hay?
Through the chair to the GM, I just have a question in relation to page 8, item on the attachment, item 14. The planned densities reflect realistic levels and types of development having regard to the planning scheme provisions and current development trends. The corrective action description states that this requires further discussion on the outcomes being achieved because there's an indication of some misalignment between LGIP assumed densities and densities being achieved on the ground due to the inability to sewer. Can you give an expansion on that, please?
Through the chair, and thank you for the question. Where there's an inability to sewer, a septic system or a HSTP or a home sewage treatment plant is the option. Depending on the ability of the surrounding ground to actually cope with what is the treatment, the treated effluent, will impact the size of the lot that then is available to that site. I'm certainly aware of some of our local townships where the cost or the need to actually sewer all blocks is quite prohibitive in development, and therefore the fallback position is to allow for slightly higher or larger aligned blocks to actually match to that. So we'll certainly be informed by urban utilities with regard to those areas. We certainly have some of that already mapped, and that's part of the process. And then that then needs to be fed into our assumptions when it comes to generated traffic and the like.
And if I just add to that, in a more general sense, some of the urban development blocks are of a different lot size to our average. So most of them are an average of, say, 700 metres, but we're finding the developers are putting out blocks on average of about 1,000 square metres. And so we're not getting the density that we would calculate for. So part of this process is to actually align what is predicted to what is actually happening on the ground to get a better understanding of how many people and how many houses will be coming into those areas.
Thank you for those answers. Further questions, councillors? Any further discussion? So I will move forward then to speak to the motion. Councillors, I move this motion and I support fully this body of work needing to be done. As you've heard this morning, the LGIP is an important part of our critical planning to support the projected future growth, and it should be understood clearly it's not trying to be all things to all people, and some of what's identified is to try and avoid that in this document, that there may be some components in it that should not be in the LGIP but need to be dealt with nonetheless in our capital plan, which is a separate piece again of work that we do on an ongoing basis as council. The importance of the LGIP is it's critical for us to understand what that so-called trunk infrastructure, that critical infrastructure that we have accountability for versus the state or other bodies, and to then be thinking about that from a financial management point of view, including collection of infrastructure charges, And I would just flag that the topic, one of the topics covered in here is about the cost to deliver this, that's significantly changed. And that is a topic of significant discussion with the state about what are the acceptable infrastructure charges to support an LGIP, because they've been fixed for some time and limited in growth. And it's causing deep concern to existing ratepayers and to councils quite widely about having the capacity to properly serve those infrastructure needs. And that will be an ongoing piece of advocacy with our state colleagues to ensure the right balance is achieved. But I commend the body of work that's outlined there. I recognise that it will take a number of years to work through in a systematic way, and I commend the motion this morning. Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak against? Seeking leave to speak additionally? Councillor McConnell?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I will agree with your comments made there. This will be a really important review and piece of work to ensure that the funding for this trunk infrastructure goes to the relevant area to fund instead of ratepayers. So I commend the report, and hopefully in 2025 or 2024 we'll come back to council and we'll see a detailed report that picks up on the 32 parts of the LGIP that weren't compliant at the moment. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to seeking leave to speak additionally? If not, I will just close with the comment. It's important to note that LGIPs do go through a statutory timeline for review because they become out of date, which is the circumstance. So the current plan is not aligned with the work that's been done around growth management strategy and so forth. So it's really important timing to have this review now to bring it up to date. And it was compliant and relevant at a point in time, and this piece of work will bring it back into relevance for the future as well. Thank you, councillors. I put the motion. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. That brings me to the close of the business items for consideration of the meeting today. And therefore, I thank those who joined us in the gallery today, both here in person and digitally. And we bid you good day, and I close the meeting at, can you see your timepiece? 9:57. Thank you.